When it comes to the Arkham franchise, there are a lot of villains that get used throughout the course of the game. Some played major roles, some played more minor roles. However, there are some villains in this that should have played a more major role, and unfortunately did not get to see the time of day or didn't get the screen time that they ultimately deserved. Now, today, I'm going to do the three villains that were the most underused in the Arkham franchise, in my opinion. I would do five, but I think that there's three that I specifically want to go more into detail about. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and without wasting too much of your time, let's get into the list. The first villain that actually, in my opinion, was one of the most underused in the Arkham franchise was one Hugo Strange. Now, this was a villain that was very interesting because this wasn't like some typical, oh, I'm such an evil person type of cliche villain. This was one who was a lot smarter than a lot of, Batman's other villains that he deals with on a day to day basis. He was a lot smarter, and he was also one of the only people who knew Batman's identity, right? Not just any person could figure that one out. So having that information alone should make someone a pretty big threat, someone that we should definitely deal with and take out. But Hugo Strange is a lot more interesting than that because he's someone who wants to be Batman. He wants to do exactly what he does. But the thing that where he falls short is, like a lot of other villains, he thinks that he can do things better. So he wants to kill Batman so he can become Batman and do a better job of being Batman because he's not afraid to kill people. Hugo Strange kind of reminds me of like an Amanda Waller type, where he'll just do whatever is necessary to get the job done. And I mean, he was working with Ra's al Ghul. They have very simple or similar, morals and values where they will kill at the cost to save another person's life. It's just what they believe, it's their principles. And I can't necessarily fault them for that. However, the one thing that really frustrates me about Hugo Strange is that he has Batman's identity, right? And we saw what happens when Batman's identity gets revealed. When people know his identity, he becomes a lot less scary because people realize he's just a human. And Hugo Strange even threatens at the start of the game that he's going to reveal Batman's identity if Batman tries to stop him. And Batman is actively trying to stop Hugo Strange throughout the course of the game, yet Hugo Strange doesn't do anything, which tells me it's just an empty threat, to be honest. Even though we know he knows Batman's identity, we know he's not bluffing because he uses the words Bruce Wayne. Capturing Bruce Wayne is so much easier than Batman, so we know he's not bluffing about the information. It's just the fact that he doesn't use it. And then when you talk about from a pure story standpoint, it felt like he kind of got the short end of the stick because he was meant to be the main villain, right? When you take a look at like Batman's Rogues Gallery, the first game, it's Batman and Joker, right? And I completely understand why they'd want to do that. It's easy, it's simple, and it's a good way to grasp the fans' attention. So going into Batman Arkham City, it kind of felt like that, the devs wanted to go into Batman's Rogues Gallery a little bit deeper, right? Because a lot of people, learned about, Batman and everything about him through the Arkham games. So the devs were probably thinking, I can only imagine, that let's go deeper into Batman's lore. Hugo Strange, not the most well-known villain in the world. He's not unknown, but he's definitely not the most well-known villain in the world. At least I would like to think. So it made it very interesting bringing in a new character that not a lot of people know of who knows Batman's identity. But then what ends up happening is he ends up getting taken over by this massive Joker blood plot that ends up lasting into Arkham Knight, which is another topic for another video. But what I personally believe is that part of the reason why they kind of gave Hugo Strange the short end of the stick is because without the Joker blood plot, there wouldn't have been a lot to do because we don't get to access Wonder Tower until the end of the game when the helicopters are like blowing stuff up and we get the data information to where we can actually access Wonder Tower. So it kind of felt like that the Joker blood plot was more of like a plot filler than anything else, and I think it's even more frustrating that, we could have gone about this entirely differently. I understand why we can't access Wonder Tower right away, because that would have ended the game. But it would have been better if we would have been able to go to other villains or other people who knew Hugo Strange and try to figure out how can we stop him. It would have made it more interesting if Hugo Strange had just simply done more throughout the course of the game. Maybe kidnap people, kill people like before Protocol 10 starts to show how serious he is. Show us something. But unfortunately, he kind of got the short end of the stick. He was underused. There was a lot of potential there with knowing Batman's identity. That alone is a lot of potential that was unfortunately missed out on. And Hugo Strange, even though, he ends up dying at the end of Batman Arkham City, which is whatever. It didn't matter to me that he died. It's just how he was used throughout the course of the game that was extremely frustrating to me. The next villain I want to talk about is someone who I've actually already made a video on in pretty decent detail, talking about the misused potential of this character, and he essentially barely got used throughout the rest of the franchise, and that would be Black Mask, because Black Mask was a character who, going into Arkham Origins, it was a similar concept to Hugo Strange, with it being a new villain. But this time, we weren't expecting to get the Joker in it. But with it being Batman Arkham Origins in hindsight, maybe it should have been obvious that the Joker was going to be in it. But I digress. The whole Black Mask thing was very interesting because during this time, this was like around the mark where Batman was about 2 years into his tenure. So by this point, Black Mask was still on top of Gotham, essentially. He was kind of like a mob boss. He kind of ran the place. Nothing went on in Gotham without Black Mask knowing about it. Then we get the Joker, surprise, surprise, who takes over, and it turns out it was never Black Mask who put the $50 million hit on Batman's head. But it was totally feasible that Black Mask would do something like that because he could have potentially have felt threatened by Batman, right? This whole plot could have been very similar as the one that we got, but instead if it was actually Black Mask or whatever, it could have been more interesting to a degree. And this was during the time where Batman Arkham Origins got a bad rap, and I think it's because Black Mask was very misused in this game. And the thing is, like, he's very, very rarely used after this. Like, after he gets, kicked out of the main story, he gets relegated to a side mission. And not even, like, a good one. It's like a wannabe Batman Arkham City one. The one with the Titan tanks and you're teaming up with Bane. It's very similar to that. You essentially just destroy 6 canisters and then you go stop them. Nothing crazy there at all, really, to report on. But then you see him again in Batman Arkham Knight, in this very brief DLC, the Red Hood one. And you see him, like, at the very beginning of Batman Arkham City. And I think you might see him in, like, one other little Riddler challenge pack thing. I think that was Black Mask, if I'm not mistaken. Other than that, you barely see him, right? He has a total of, like, maybe not even an hour's screen time, like, maybe 30 minutes throughout the course of the games. And it's extremely frustrating because Black Mask was someone who had so much potential. He's actually a character that I actually don't have a lot of background information on. I don't know a lot about the Black Mask lore, if you will. So I was kind of interested to see, what is it about this character? What makes him so special that he can be the main antagonist of this game? But unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. We ended up getting what we got. And Black Mask is someone who, I don't really think he's really featured in much. Like, I don't think that he's even been really mentioned much since his little debut in Batman Arkham Origins. I know it wasn't, like, his character debut, but, like, he hasn't been in any movies or games to my knowledge since, and he's someone who in the future I would love to see finally get the main antagonist role that he deserves. And the last villain I want to talk about for today's video is actually the one that I wanted to see the most make another appearance in Batman Arkham Knight. Unfortunately, it just was not meant to be, and that would be one character that goes by the name of Anarchy, right? Anarchy is a character who, in my opinion, is extremely interesting. He's not just bare bones. He doesn't lack substance. There isn't there isn't really much to him. Now, to a degree, I can understand if someone was to say that Anarchy is kind of like a cliche of wanting to stop corruption. However, I think that Anarchy does a good job of going deeper than that. Anarchy's not some typical wants to stop corruption, killing people. He goes about it in a much deeper way. Like, for example, he plants bombs where he thinks Gotham's corruption is at its strongest, right? That in itself could be called cliche. However, I also think that at least Anarchy does a good job of coming up with reasons for what it was he wants to do. And during Batman Arkham Origins, he couldn't have been older than, 16. And you can kind of tell that Anarchy has admiration for Batman, and that Batman's the reason why he's doing this. But similar to a Hugo Strange, he thinks he can do a better job takes matters into his own hands and goes too far. But he also kind of admits as much. I think he knows that he's young and is going to make mistakes. And I think that, he's kind of doing a bit of trial and error, it seems like. But his message is something that a lot of people nowadays can kind of resonate with a little bit. When you talk about, corruption within any sort of city, whether it's with cops, maybe lawyers or the sort of justice department, you can talk about corruption in almost any sort of business, politicians, whatever it is you can think of. Anarchy does have a very strong point, and I think his speeches have aged extremely well, because in today's day and age, how often do you see misinformation? How often do you see corruption within our own law enforcement and political figures? And, not to get, in too deep into controversy or anything, but you see controversy everywhere nowadays. Everything has become political, and the thing that he raises, the point he raises, and this is the thing I feel the most strong about, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to see him make another appearance, it's because he actually challenges you to actually think for a second, right? He doesn't want people to just be a mindless drone. He wants people to actually think for themselves and not just believe everything you're told, right? If you look at, a lot of, media outlets and stuff, they tell you whatever they can to get you to watch, but people don't do their own research. People tend to just spout whatever they hear. And I think that that's the message that Anarchy doesn't want us to do. He doesn't want us to be mindless drones who are sucked into the propaganda and watching our mindless TV shows. He wants us to do our own research and think for ourselves. And as a person who's just a regular guy of regular people in, society, then I think that we can kind of relate to that, as if I'm not some rich celebrity who has inside knowledge. I'm not one of the Hollywood elite type people. I'm not a part of that group, so I can relate to what Anarchy's saying on a more personal level. And I wanted to see him make an appearance in Batman Arkham Knight, because I believe that, it's probably been about 10 years since the events of Batman Arkham Origins, give or take, roughly. So imagine by then, Anarchy is in his probably around mid to late 20s by that point. And he could have been something that has matured and could have even become an ally to Batman. He didn't even have to be a bad guy, right? He could have been someone who had matured and wanted to make an appearance similar to an Azrael type. I would have preferred to take Azrael's, side mission out and put Anarchy in. That would have been a much better substitution, in my opinion. And guys, these are the 3 villains who I believe were the most underused in the Batman Arkham franchise. And while there are others who could have got more screen time and had a lot more potential, in my personal opinion, I kind of just wanted to go over the ones who I think were kind of either done the most dirty, or ones who I just wanted to see more of because they genuinely intrigued me as characters in these games, right? Because a lot of these characters have a lot of potential. I just think that the Arkham universe kind of leaned so heavily into the Joker that it didn't really give much of a chance to allow other villains to grow or allow us to see who they really are as people. I really wanted to get that deeper connection, and unfortunately we just didn't get with these people. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Which villain did you guys want to see more in the Batman Arkham franchise, and who would you want to see in a new Batman game? It doesn't even have to be Arkham. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to leave a thumbs up, make sure to turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!